just crawling across you to get behind the thing there.
Welcome, everybody. Okay. Are you ready to another World of Ability Podcast Network? I am Emily Gumler and a podcast engineer here, and we are excited to bring you another episode of the World of Pets with Debbie Hayes. So you're gonna love this because it's all about our pets, our furry friends, and we have a special guest today, or two guests. One being a furry friend. So I am going to bring them in here and have.
There we go.
Kick us off here.
All right. Thank you, Emily. Appreciate it. So, yes, I am Debbie Hayes, and we want our pets to feel safe with us. We want them to feel our unconditional love, just like they have unconditional love for us. And we want them to live as long as possible. We want that, however, to be a healthy, happy life. So we feel that we found something that can facilitate that in the form of supplements and food that has Coriolis versicolor mushrooms in it. And yes, we want to share because we want everybody to know about that. But the main focus of our World of Pets is just for us to discover everything about pets and sometimes laugh and sometimes cry about what they do and where they take us. So we have Anthony today. Anthony and I actually became friends on Facebook because of our churches that we respectively went to at that time were like sister churches or brother churches, whatever you want. And he put a post on Facebook that he had a fur baby that is going to be trained as a service dog for him. So we're here to observe Cobb and see what he does, that when he's not trained, and then we can have him back when he is trained and see how great he did in his training. But we also want to talk about the organizations that facilitated this, why Anthony is getting a service dog. And so Anthony, would you like to answer a couple of those questions for me?
Yeah, sure. So this is Cobb, and she is about 15 or 16 months old. And I actually adopted her from a shelter down there in Tucson, the Pima Animal Care Clinic. And anyway, so about a year ago, my dad was at a fair, a local fair here. My parents live in Washington.
Anthony, can you turn your volume up a little bit?
Okay, yes. Let me try this. Where's my button? Can you hear me now? Is that better?
Yes, that is. Okay, thank you.
So, anyway, my dad went to a fair over in Idaho. We live right on the Washington-Idaho state line, about 30 minutes from the state line. And anyway, while at this fair in Kootenai County, Idaho, he came across an organization called Canines for a Cause. And he just got to talking to them. He said, "What do you do?" And they said, "Our main purpose is we help disabled veterans get the service animals that they need for their disabilities." Mm-hmm. So I am a disabled veteran, and because of that, I can't work in the traditional sense for a job because my physical limitations limit me from working a full day and being able to function after that day. I'm literally like crawling to my car by the end of the day if I exert that kind of energy due to my physical disabilities. So I moved up here in September, and one of the first things my dad gave me was a brochure from Canines for a Cause. So I reached out to them, and I sent them an email, and I thought it would be a couple weeks. This was like back in February. I thought, well, I'll reach out to them. It'll be a couple weeks, and they'll get back to me. The very next day, they emailed me. The following day, they called me. And they asked a little bit about my story. I explained my situation to them. And they said, "You absolutely qualify. We want to hook you up with one of our nonprofit partners because they're not in Washington or Idaho." I said, "Okay." So they hooked me up with a place called Faithful Canine Training, and I'm wearing their hat. It's run by a guy named Richard, or he goes by Richie. And Richie and his staff reached out to me the following week after I had talked with Canines for a Cause. And Richie asked me some simple questions. He said, well, I want to meet you and Cobb. And I said, absolutely. So I brought Cobb in. And Richie is in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. His organization, Faithful Canine Trainer, is in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho as well. And after meeting with Richie, it became very obvious that Cobb was a good candidate for the program and that Richie would be able to help me. But one of the things that Richie emphasized to me was that his organization, Faithful Canine Trainer, and his nonprofit called Faithful Fields work not only with disabled veterans to help them get the service animals they need, but they also work with anybody who needs a service animal. And Faithful Fields goes to the degree of, if you don't have a dog that can be your service dog, then they pair you with a dog and adopt you for that dog with little to no cost. And after hearing Richie's story and Richie's heart for not just veterans, but other people with disabilities, he shared with me that it can cost anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 for an individual to get a service animal.
Yeah.
And all this is going to cost me is a bag of food for the dog while she's in her 2 months of training. And so for the veterans, Faithful Fields and Faithful Canine Trainer are basically taking care of her for around $80. And
Nice.
so instead of getting it for $50,000 or $100,000, I'm getting it for $80. And so the program that Richie partnered with is through the state of Idaho. And what they do is that they take inside their state prisons and they have their state police dog handlers go in so many times a year to these state prisons and work with the inmates that are low-level inmates and getting ready to release back into society. And what they teach these inmates is a skill. And the skill that they teach these inmates is how to be a dog trainer, and specifically how to train dogs to become service animals. So
That's
my
wonderful.
post on Facebook that you referenced, Debbie, I think said something along the lines of, my dog is going to jail for 2 months, because she is.
Right. And I thought it was a joke. I thought I thought you just meant that because the dog is going to be separated from you for 2 months and be going through this training, but you meant literally behind bars.
Yeah, so the way that it works in Idaho is that these dogs actually stay at the prison with the inmate. Well, not necessarily always with the inmate. Toward the end of their training, they do stay with the inmate to get used to the whole night thing and meeting the needs and all that stuff. But they have the kennels right there located very close by in the prison. So the inmates go every day and get the dogs out of the kennel and work with them and train them and do activities with them. They're with the dog all day long, all up until bedtime. I think it's like the last 2 weeks of the 2 months, the dog stays with them 24/7 to get used to staying with you 24/7. So once she completes the program, Richie will go and pick her up from prison. She'll get paroled, and she'll come back to his facility in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And from there, I will pick up the dog and I will work with Richie and Cobb once a week to tailor fit the commands to meet my needs for what I need her for as a service animal.
Great. Wow. So what I'm seeing from this program is a great benefit, obviously, to the disabled veteran, or as you said, they will work with other people other than veterans. So that's a plus, because obviously there are people other than veterans that do need the service dogs. Sure. But as far as the prisoners are going, teaching them a skill that's not your run-of-the-mill skill that you would think that, that they would be learning in prison, number one. But number two, that companionship, because that unconditional love, that the inmates are going to get that for the animals, and the animals are going to get it in return. It may be at a different level because the animals are in training, but still, I just see that as a huge benefit for the prisoners that are involved in the program. Do you concur with that?
Yeah, and so what I didn't share, and I don't know if you know this, Debbie, or not, but I was a federal correction officer in the Federal Bureau of Prisons for almost a decade. I did 9 months. I I did 9 years, 5 months, and 5 days. So just short of a decade, working in federal law enforcement. And I worked in the fifth most violent prison in the federal prison system for most of that decade. And one of the things
Wilmot Road.
was that, yes. And so
Okay, go ahead.
one of the things that I learned is that the recidivism rate, at least in the federal prison systems, I can't speak for state and local systems, in the federal prison system, the recidivism rate, which is the return of the rate of return of an inmate to prison. So once an inmate goes to prison and they reoffend and come back to prison, it's called recidivating. And so the recidivism rate amongst inmates in the federal system hasn't fallen below 80% since the Reagan administration.
Say that again, please.
It has not fallen below 80% since the Reagan administration. So since Ronald Reagan's administration, 80% of inmates return to prison in the federal system. And so one of the things that I learned very early on in my career in the federal prison system is that part of the reason I believe this is a problem is because inmates don't know any other way. I would literally have inmates releasing, look me in the face and say, I'll be back. This is the only life I know. And unless we give them something positive and productive to do, what is their motivation not to return to prison?
Right.
And what is their motivation? A lot of these people don't have a solid family or faith system. And I think it takes both a solid family and faith system on the outside, but that's a different story and a different podcast for a different day. But I think it takes that. So I think what the state of Idaho is doing here is not only a benefit to the inmate, but it's a benefit to society as a whole, because you're giving these purpose and you're giving them a reason and a motivation to not want to recidivate or return to prison.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. That's wonderful. And I knew nothing about that. So I just, yeah, that is really great. So what, do you mind if I ask what they're going to be training the service dog specifically to help you with?
Oh, sure. I don't mind at all. I myself, like most veterans, have different battles that I face emotionally, what we call the invisible scars. Some of them you can't see. And then I have some visible scars. Like, for example, I had a spinal fusion in March of 22, and my back just has never healed. And that's why I'm very limited in the physical work I can do. Not only did I have a spinal fusion, I have arthritis in my back called degenerative disc disease, and I have osteoarthritis in my hips. And so it just becomes very painful. My body becomes very painful as the day wears on. And so one of the things that Cobb is going to help me do is things like remember to take my daily medications. If I drop something, she'll be able to pick it up and hand it to me. There will be commands for that. She'll be help me with my depression and PTSD and all the things of that nature. So both the visible and the invisible wounds that I, as a veteran, along with so many other veterans, struggle with.
Right. Wow. That's fantastic. You must be really excited.
Oh, I am. And I'm very passionate also about helping other veterans. You can probably see the things behind me. It's all about horses. One of my goals is to have an equine therapy ranch in about 10 years. And not therapy for the horses, but therapy through horses for the veterans.
Right.
And so something that I'm very passionate about. And so when my dad found this program of Canines with a Cause, and let me just clarify something you said earlier, Deborah. I don't know that, or Debbie, I'm sorry. It's my mom's same name. So anyway, I get it confused. But Canines with a Cause themselves, I don't know if they help other people outside of veterans. What I know is that they put me in touch with Faithful Fields and Richie's nonprofit through that called Faithful Canine Trainer. And that Faithful Fields is a nonprofit that wants to help everybody, not just veterans. But they
and that's why I'm sorry if I didn't vocalize it that way, but that's what I interpreted you to say. So
but both organizations are extremely helpful. But yeah, so specifically, like I said, I've had to adjust myself because there's times, especially like if I sit for a long period or I lay down like at night, where it's very difficult for me to get out of bed because of the arthritis and my broken back. So I broke my back in Iraq, and that's why I had the spinal fusion.
Okay.
And so I have to use canes for that. Well, the canes that I have, I don't have one right here readily available. I was going to show you one. My grandfather used. I think he might have made them, but I'm not positive about that. But anyway, he used these canes himself. And so I was showing Richie one of those canes, and he said, we need one with a strap. So I went to Walmart for $10, and I bought a cane with a strap. And she's going to be trained to grab that strap and bring it to me whenever I might need it. Because I don't need it 24/7 to walk.
Right.
Like I said, as the day wears on, my body gets more and more unable to move. And I'm only 40 years old. So for me, that's a struggle for somebody at 40 years old. So to have a dog to do that, to have her to remind me when to take my medications. We're going to put them in like a soft bag, almost like a Crown Royal bag, if you're familiar with that. And so that she could reach down if the medicine falls, or if I'm out in public and I drop it, she can reach down and grab it and hand it to me, and those kind of things. So it's going to be something that when you go through this program, it's tailor fit for you as the individual and your needs.
And you said that Faithful Fields is the one that does that, right?
Well,
Because I mean,
with
if you're going to divide up who's doing what as
So-
far as the two organizations.
right, and the reason that Canines with a Cause introduced me to and set me up with Faithful Fields is just because they don't have a branch here locally. I believe they're based out of Minnesota. And so my understanding of it is if they have an office or a facility nearby you, then they go ahead and handle everything themselves. If not, they partner with nonprofits in your area. And so that's what they do. And that's how I got introduced to Faithful Fields, is because they partner with Richie, and basically they help his nonprofit fund this so the training can go through.
And Faithful Fields is the one that's in Coeur d'Alene.
It is in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho.
So that's pretty darn convenient for you, huh?
Yeah, well, it's about an hour away, but the good thing is where the dog is being trained is also another hour from Coeur d'Alene. And I won't have to be there while she's being trained for those 2 months. I will just come off after she paroles. I will come to Richie's office and pick her up.
Right. So then when she's finished, and you said you're going to be working with the organization and Cobb, then are you going to Coeur d'Alene for that, or?
Yeah, so we will once a week. We'll decide on a day. Myself and Faithful Fields will decide on a day, and I will bring Cobb once a week, and they will tailor fit the commands to me. So one of the things that was attractive about Cobb is she's a mix of a border collie and a beagle. The breed is often referred to as a border beagle. And if you know anything about those breeds and about dogs in general, those are two very intelligent breeds. And so she's very, very smart. I share with a lot of people, and I think I told my mom and some others, it should be almost a crime how easy she was to train when I was there in Tucson with her. And so one of the things that I have her trained to do is if I go, Cobb, stay with me. She comes right over and sits right next to me, and she won't move until I tell her you can go. And I only had to repeat the command with her there in Tucson about 4 times, and then she got it right down as a puppy. And she
Wow.
And so when we were in the office, Richie said, let her off her leash. I want to see her go away, and then you give her whatever command to come back. And so we let her go for about 5 minutes. We let her get distracted by something there in the office and let her go for 5 minutes. I went, Cobb, come to me. And she came right over and sat next to my chair. And Richie was like,
Wow.
unbelievable. I said, yeah, because technically she's still a puppy. She's not even 18 months old. And so he was very impressed by that. And so that's a command that, like, we will tailor fit her training to me by using commands she's familiar with. So like the stay with me and the you can go and things like that. We will tailor fit those commands for her to meet my needs.
Wow. That's great. Where is she right now?
I had to let her out because she's not trained yet. she
Oh.
was whining and barking.
Yes, that's a good point.
We live on 20 acres, and she loves being a country dog, so she just gets out here and runs and messes with all the animals, and it's great. And so,
Yep. Wow, that is really good. Trying to think of what other questions. Golly, I did give Emily the names of those organizations. I was hoping that she would put those up on the screen. We can get her to do that in a
Sure.
bit. Wow.
So
So when you came down to Arizona, then did she stay up there with your parents, or did she come down here with you?
I'm sorry, you were breaking up there for a second. Can you repeat the question?
Sure. When you were down in Arizona a couple weeks ago, did she come down with you, or she stayed in Washington State?
Oh, you mean this last trip where I went back to see my kids?
Right. Yeah.
No, she stayed here because she's not trained yet. Once I have her trained as a service animal, obviously they can't deny her from going places with you, so she'll be coming with me everywhere once I have her trained and certified.
Right.
So this time she stayed here. But yeah.
Okay.
But I just wanted to emphasize about Richie and Faithful Field. So, for example, my brother's a disabled veteran as well, and but he has a daughter that is autistic and has epilepsy, and so I told him about this, and I told Richie a little bit about it, and he doesn't have a dog, and I told him, I said, hey, just give Richie a call, man. I said, you don't have to do anything but talk to him. He's like, well, we don't have a dog. I said, that's the beautiful thing is that Faithful Fields will partner you with a dog at little to no cost to you. And then your autistic and epileptic daughter has a service animal she needs. So I'm just going to keep encouraging him to contact the organization. But Richie is really passionate about that at Faithful Fields. And they just want to help people at a fraction of the cost of what it actually costs to get these animals.
That's great. Yeah. I started listening to you and forgot my question. Oh, it was actually a comment about your niece. She's your niece, right?
Yes.
The disabled. Yeah. I mean, so the dog can be trained to anticipate when she's going to have a seizure, correct?
Yeah, I'm assuming so. I didn't go that far as to discuss that with him because I don't have that need in my immediate family. My brother.
Right. Yeah, that's my understanding.
Yeah,
and what so that they can somehow, this is what I think to be correct, is that they can alert whatever they're trained to do, to alert, that would alert your niece that she was in danger of having a seizure, so that she can lay down or do whatever they've predetermined she needs to do in order to keep herself safe.
Right. No, I
think that is correct, and which I think is just absolutely phenomenal and wonderful. I mean, obviously the benefits to you are going to be wonderful as well. So yeah, I encourage anybody that has issues, that they think that they could take advantage of any of these programs. And there are other programs out there. So if somebody is taking advantage of them, and for some reason, because of capacity or whatever, that if Canines for a Cause, Faithful Friends cannot help them, then to keep looking, so that they can find something, find someone or find an organization that can help them.
Right. No, but Richie with Faithful Fields went as far as to say, like, they would actually fly my brother and his daughter out to meet the dog before the training. And then once with that dog, they would send the dog through the training there in Idaho at the state prison. And then when the dog had completed, they would fly, either Richie with the dog would fly back out to North Carolina where my brother is, or they would fly him and his daughter back out here to Idaho to tailor fit those commands for his daughter. So Richie is really passionate about this at Faithful Fields. He really just wants to help people. And he's willing to travel anywhere across the country. And when I mentioned to him what I want to do with the equine therapy, he said, hey, let's meet up for lunch one day. Maybe we can partner together and do something together, horses and dogs. And I thought that'd be neat too.
Oh, yeah.
So probably, a few stages away from even having that become reality. But
yeah.
Definitely And just a real quick humorous story. When my mom heard about the program and what was going on, she crochets. So she crocheted Cobb a black and white prison striped sweater for her to go into with to the program.
Oh boy. Well, hopefully the inmates will think we'll see the humor in it, right?
I hope so.
Oh, that's great. That is funny. Yep. So what I wanted to say was a couple of different trains of thought. And number one is like you were talking about disabled folks. Because are you familiar with TRAC here in Tucson? TRAK. It is equine therapy for disabled children.
Interesting. Okay.
And I mean, I've seen pictures. I'm trying to think. I've been there one time when they had children there, but mostly I remember seeing the pictures that they were the kids were just. I mean, obviously they're little kids, and horses are big animals,
Right. Yes.
you know, and they were just sitting up there like big as you please. I'm sure that in the beginning, when they first get on there, they might be a little bit intimidated, but yeah, that's another program that's just wonderful. And then as far as the veterans program, I had mentioned to you Project Die Hard,
Yes.
which is they're not okay. They don't they have apparently they have a fishing lake. And they do have a community building, so they can have some programs there, but their goal is to have a facility that can have living for a year for veterans who need it, for 2 families and 8 individuals. So they're in Paducah, Kentucky, and they do have breakfast a couple times a month, and they look for donations for that, because they do pay for the veterans breakfast. Anybody is welcome to go, of course. But that's one. And then there is an equine, I'm sure there's more than one, but these just happen to be the ones that I'm familiar with. There is an equine therapy called the Veterans Ranch. And they've been in business in Florida without a ranch for a couple of years. And from what I understand from talking to the owner, they do they have like borrowed horses that they're using, but they are partnering up so that they have the equine therapy for the veterans. But they do have property in Texas, and the same thing. They need donations, obviously, to get
Sure.
to get the buildings off the ground, and then they want to hire veterans as well, and they would have the living accommodations there. So,
and you said that was the first one was called Operation Die Hard?
ProjectDieHard.org.
All right, I'm just taking down that information. Sorry,
Yeah, I think I had sent that to you in a message. And then the other one is the Veterans Ranch. So
it's definitely a need, not just amongst non-veterans, but veterans. Most people are familiar that 22 veterans a day commit suicide. And here's the way that I look at it. It's sad. Whenever I personally, because I'm an Iraq war veteran, and whenever I meet a Vietnam veteran, which I have one that I go to church with out here in Washington, or in Idaho, actually, I go to church in Idaho, and I go to church with him in Idaho. He's become a really good friend of mine, and he's a Vietnam veteran.
He what? I'm sorry.
Debt of gratitude from our country, but Vietnam veterans are owed an extra special debt because of what they went through upon their return, and just a philosophy.
Yeah.
But part of the problem with veterans is our government asks us to go over and see atrocities that humans were not created to see. We were not made to see the things that are happening over there. And if a veteran's not careful and doesn't come back, and of course there's that soldier's pride where you don't want to admit you need help, right? And you don't want to admit that you might not be the way you were before you left. I know plenty of guys whose story would read similar to mine, where I was loved as a teenager. Everybody loved me. I never had problems with my temper. I never exploded on people. I was never argumentative. And then I went over there in combat and something happened. I came back and now I can't control myself. I'm constantly apologizing to my family and my kids. I'm constantly doing this. And that should be a sign to that veteran that, hey, you need some help. And not just the organizations that I'm talking about here with Canines for a Cause and Faithful Fields, but we need more organizations that I believe will bring faith and practical living together for these veterans and say, we're here to help you.
Right.
And that's what it's about.
Yeah. And I think that what I understand from Project Die Hard is that the number of veteran suicides per day now is actually 44
Jeez.
and possibly up. So it is increasing. We need to support the veterans. We need to ramp up what we have. I guess, I hope you're not going to be mad at me for saying this, but because I was the Vietnam era,
Yeah.
I feel that the Vietnam warfare was harder. I don't mean to belittle the fact that you have PTSD. I'm not saying that that's not important.
I agree with you.
But I think the atrocities that, things that I have heard that, I mean, I wouldn't even repeat them on here. They're just so gross that happened to the veterans of Vietnam are just, awful.
I agree with you for several reasons. And to that point, and I'm going to make one more point about what you're talking about, but to that point, really Vietnam was kind of the change in the way, not just the United States, but really the whole world fights warfare now. In other words, before we ever put boots on the ground, 9 times out of 10, the United States has already sent in air support, and they've blown the crap out of all of their military and intelligence headquarters of whatever country that we're trying to defend ourselves against. And so warfare took a colossal shift after Vietnam. So they did see it. I agree with you completely. The things that they saw in Vietnam and working backwards in Korea, in World War II and World War I, what we see now in some ways pales in comparison to that. Now, the psychological warfare and the chemical warfare that we see now is different, and it's different on a different level, and that's just fact. That we have to. The other thing that we owe to Vietnam veterans, and one of the things that helped me. So when I came back from Iraq, we left Iraq, we flew to Kuwait, we went to a Air Force base, a United States Air Force base in Germany. From Germany, we flew to Shannon, Ireland, had a brief layover in Ireland, and then flew into the United States across the Atlantic to a town called Bangor, Maine. And little did I know that President Bush Sr. lived in Bangor, Maine. And so the second I got back there, he was there with a lot of other people, waving flags, applauding, handing us cell phones and telling us to talk to our families that we hadn't had constant communication with in quite some time.
Uh-huh.
That's a much different reception than the Vietnam veterans got when they came back. And so as a country, and just me personally, I can only speak for myself, I feel as if we owe the Vietnam veterans an extra debt of gratitude.
Yeah.
And support as well.
Yes. Yes.
And I personally think it's a national sin what happened upon their return. Part of what makes our return a little bit easier is the fact that we had a country that was very united after 9/11 and stood behind the veterans and wanted to help us and wanted to see us succeed. And I wish that every era of veterans had that reception.
Yes. I agree with that. So I'm going to say a little bit about the mushroom, about the Coriolis versicolor mushroom that I talked about. And I think you and I had this conversation before by messenger, but it does help pets. It also helps humans. And what it is able to do is boost the immune system to a point where the body can heal itself. And it's happened with catastrophic illnesses or something as minor as, like a infection. So there's over 400 studies that have been done. I need to go through there. I mean, they're categorized. I'm not offering to go one by one, 400 studies, but to take a look and see if there has been anything done on, say, the PTSD, because it would be so great. I mean, even the things that we talk about now, I'll tell you the story. We have this testimonial Tuesday. We have motivational calls every day, every Monday through Friday, but we have testimonial Tuesdays. And this morning, the story was about a cat who was on her last leg. The owner was devastated, of course, because the cat was doing so poorly. And it was, I believe, what I understood just like a week ago yesterday, that she started on the products and she wasn't eating. So the owner was actually taking one of the pills for humans comes in capsule form, which is great because you can break it open and then you have the powder that for a person you can put it on food. But she was putting it just in water in a syringe and feeding the animal that way, and then went on to give her a product called Super Sauce for Cats. And here it is 8 days later. And the vet had wanted to do some kind of procedure that the lady didn't even have the funds for. And now the cat is almost back to its normal self. That just gives people an example of what the products can do. So you can get in touch with me at LinkedIn, which is usually Emily thinks ahead of me here. So LinkedIn.com/in/Debbie dash, there it is. See, Debbie Hayes AZ. And then the website is down there also, debspets.com. That's my brand. And then it takes it to the company website. So
awesome.
Anyway, golly, this was great. I learned some stuff that I definitely was not prepared for, but delighted. I think that Idaho has their act together if they're using their high-level inmates for the dog training to give them someone to care for and to care for them while they're there, and to give them a great opportunity for doing something in that field when they get out. So,
and I agree. To me, it's just common sense, not only from an inmate standpoint, but there's countless studies and research that show people with medical issues, dogs help. There's hospitals that allow dogs to come in and work with patients and things of that nature. There's just something about a dog that God put innate within a dog that they're just able to help in that manner. And I can't explain it scientifically. I'm not a science guy anyway, but it's just something that was innate inside a dog. And so, I think it's more than just the right thing that Idaho is doing. I think it's common sense, if you ask me.
Yep. Very good. Well, we'll have to keep in touch, Anthony, and
for sure, and look forward to the after when she gets back from training.
Yeah, me too. So, Emily, would you like to close us out, please?
Well, thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and thank you, Anthony, for joining us, you and Cobb. We are here every Tuesday at the same time, 8 o'clock Central, 6 Pacific. So if you are interested in being on the show, connect with us. Otherwise, we go live on YouTube at World of Pets Podcast on YouTube. So you can tune in there as well. So I guess until next week.
And next week, you're going to be a year older, Emily. Happy birthday.
Oh, happy birthday.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
So I guess until next week, stay happy.
All right. Thank you both very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Talk to you soon.